Out on a wet Friday evening, and it just shows, I think, the level of concern that there is in the city about these proposals if, and it is still in, but if Varney were to go ahead and become an academy. And I'm here because obviously this is such a key issue in the constituency, not just for Varney School. One of the points I want to make is that what happens at Varney, or indeed any school that turns itself into an academy, has massive impacts on all the other schools in the area. So this is an issue for all schools. I agree with everything that Alistair said except one thing. I think he said that going into the election, Lib Dems are the only party against the academies. So I just So my priority, as I'm sure everybody's priority is, to secure the best possible local education for our children. And yet the evidence suggests time and again that academies is not the right way to do that, and that their impact is not just on the kids in that school, but as I say, they have a huge and largely negative impact on the remaining non-academy schools in their area, particularly in the way they divert money away from them. And that's why this issue is of such importance, I would argue, to everybody in this city, not just for those with a specific interest at Varney. And I think what's deeply worrying is that while the media and other politicians' focus has been somewhat distracted with Andrew Lansley and all his many U-turns on the NHS, stealthily away there, Michael Gove hasn't just been doing nothing, he's been pushing his whole agenda very, very strongly indeed. And I would argue that what that agenda is nothing less than the removal of English education from the control of local councils. I think we should be under no illusion about that. That's what we're talking about here. In 27 out of the 152 English local authority areas, academies now account for the majority of secondary schools. And within a year, they will constitute nearly a third of the total nationwide. Now, at the beginning of the meeting, Alistair gave a national perspective on the Academies programme, and we've heard that academies are launched primarily as a way to allow the private sector to run our schools. And the argument goes that this helps with funding and introduces some aspects of the private sector, such as efficiency we're supposed to understand, competition, value for money, all the rhetoric. Now, balancing the books is particularly important to schools at a time of government cuts and austerity measures. And a survey that was done, I think, through the Anti-Academies Alliance showed that over 70% of head teachers said that getting more money was their main reason for seeking academy status. A school that converts to academy status gets a share of the money that the local authority holds back for central support services, and it gets slightly more control over its budget as well. But of course that begs the question that if academies are getting a share of the money that would otherwise go to the central services for the whole local authority area, what impact does that have on the rest of those local services once that money is being drained away by the academies? And sure enough, the money available to councils to support other schools gets reduced in response. And that can only spell bad news, I would argue, for the other schools in the area. Other schools, including those that are coping with the effects of academies' high exclusion policies, will essentially have less money available. Less money available for provision such as special educational needs, free school meals, music services and library services. And I simply fail to see how that could be a good idea for schools across the city. Alistair spoke as well actually about the whole issue of consultation. I just wanted to say that when the Academies Bill was going through Parliament, that was one of the areas that I was really pushing hard on. I mean, you can see that the government had a majority and we weren't being able to turn the whole idea, but at the very least we were trying so hard to change some of those rules around consultation. And what we've been left with is just such a farce. It is so insulting, the kind of way in which the consultation can happen after the event. It can be ignored. You can decide who you want to consult. I mean, it's just, I think it's just deeply, deeply insulting. Now, going back to the issue of the money, there are many more cost-effective ways to improve education other than going down the academy route. And if the government's got a bit of money to spare, well, then they could be using it to support one-to-one tuition for pupils unable to read, for example, or additional help for pupils for whom English is not their first language. And even the excess cost of academy buildings compared to other new schools would be enough to fund one-to-one tuition from a qualified teacher full-time for each of those pupils for 5 years. If properly funded, state schools remain the best way to meet our young people's educational needs, not schools where the balance sheets take precedence over a balanced curriculum, or where shiny buildings take priority over staffing. Now, I started by saying that the thinking behind academies was to introduce the private sector values to our education system. And I just want to briefly explore that further and question what happens when we allow the private sector to determine what our young people learn. And so what can we see from the experience of academies to date? Well, you'll sometimes hear, certainly, some stories of schools that have been turned around as a result of becoming academies with, they will say, vastly improved behaviour, attendance and results. Well, first of all, have a look at the exclusion policies. That might well be because they've excluded some of the pupils out of that particular intake. And the NUT as well has pointed out that many of those success stories, if you like, are the result of increased funding for specialist status, or they're to do with flexibilities allowed to teachers that should be enjoyed at all schools, not necessarily just the result of the so-called academy effect. There's evidence too that when people say that academies will deliver better exam results, it's actually based on a significant narrowing of the curriculum. There was a study done for the government by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and why it was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ofsted, I have no idea, but there we are, it was. And they were looking at new academies overall, and they found that of the more successful pupils, in other words, those gaining 5 A stars to C's, 2/3 didn't study a foreign language, half study neither history nor geography, and a quarter don't follow a creative or performing art. I mean, 10% achieve a C in history, 14% in geography, and 24% in a language. And so there really is a significant reduction in the curriculum that's being offered. There's also clear evidence that academies to date aren't delivering on their promise of better results. Academies show no improvement for the most disadvantaged. The most basic success criteria at age 16 is level 1, i.e. 5 or more A to G grades, and less than 10% nationally fail to reach this level. In the academies, nearly 20% of pupils miss that target, which is slightly worse than their predecessor schools, and despite a changing population which should have worked to their advantage. So by the standards of European and other competitive countries, these pupils are still poorly educated. And yes, of course, the national curriculum isn't perfect, and yes, of course, we need to improve educational standards at our schools across the board. Teachers do need greater flexibility. Teaching should be focused on genuine learning and achievement rather than jumping through hoops and ticking boxes. But the idea that giving control of the curriculum to any one person, or indeed to a business that happens to have enough money to run a school, that doesn't seem to me to be the best way to go about raising standards in our schools. How many of us actually want our children to be educated in a place where those kinds of values are the ones that hold sway? You know, most people would agree that what they want for their children would be basically that they achieve their potential, whether that's academically or whether it's on the running track or whether it's musically or in some other way. I think we want our children to be open-minded, that they take responsibility for their actions, that they're happy when they leave the house each morning, that they have an interest in learning, they have an interest in listening to the views of others. Academies remove schools from the control of parents, teachers and the local community and put them in the hands of private businesses, individuals or faith groups. Good education is crucial and we should be fighting to improve local schools, not to send them off. And that's why I think this debate on the future of Varney School is so important. Thank you.
Academies would be really nice for students for many reasons, but we only have time to name a few.
One of the reasons is that the teaching standard might fall dramatically. All the money will be going into services that the council were giving but will no longer be providing. That money which is at the moment going into our lessons.
Another point is that the headmaster and governors can pick and choose who they want to come into their academy. This means that they might only take students who have really good grades or come from the right type of family. This means that future students will not get to meet lots of different types of people.
One of the reasons is that the governors get to choose our timetables. They can give us as much and as little of each subject as they want. This means, if they wanted to, they could take away all our art and replace it with extra English or maths. In some academies, the curriculum could be changed to reflect particular views or religious beliefs.
If Varney turned into an academy, then all of these and more might happen. If all of these happen, then Varney would be Varney. It would be a completely different school and not better.
Thank you for listening.
The funds that come into an academy are no different to what they get now because the services that the current LA local authority provide, that money is taken out of their budget, as Caroline said, so there's no extra money for them to provide extra services. There is no evidence to show that academies produce better results and are a better learning environment for students. Under the new rules of converting to an academy, schools are given bribes by the government to allow freedoms from the national curriculum, the national pay scales for terms and conditions for the staff. There's changes to the length of school terms and the working days. They can create a divide between them and the other schools in the area. Once changed to an academy, it is very, very hard to change back to an academy, to a mainstream local authority controlled school. The governors, which I'm not sure that the governors realise, that they can be asked to take on a lot more of the responsibility for financial control, the buildings and any assets of that particular school. As trade unions, we're all concerned about the security of the employment of our members and their future terms and conditions and what that would mean for them. If the school, if the academy gets into financial difficulties, there is no help from the local authority, which is what they have now, which is a big difference for people. The school cannot function effectively on its own, and it prevents every child getting a fair chance of a good education. For special needs children, the risk of taking away that local authority support gives them, their life chances and their futures are compromised on that. As we said, change over to in these conversions, if you like. It can happen very, very quickly. It can be done in as little as 3 months, so it's a very challenging time. And if the governors vote on the 29th of June to go down the route of an academy status, it could be done very quickly, probably by September, October of this year. So it's really important that the parents get involved in the campaign. We challenged the head teacher, William, for a full consultation with everybody to talk through everything with them, which hasn't been done so far. The staff in the school have not been fully informed of what his intentions are. All it is that we've just expressed an interest. But by expressing an interest, once you send that email and press that button, it's very hard to go back on that. So I think that's what parents do need to be aware of to their children as well. And I think the girls did a fantastic job up here and there and telling you what they feel about and what changes that would mean for them in the school. Okay.